channel. My name's Angela and this is Devon Thread Tales. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I'm going to be doing a collaboration with Karen from So Little Time, and we're both reviewing the Tilly and the Buttons pattern, the Marigold Jumpsuit, which is what I've got on today. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the pattern and how I've made it, and I'm also going to pass you over to Karen at some point during the video as well. It'd be really great if you could pop over to Karen's channel and watch her review of this as well and give her some support and a thumbs up. Karen's absolutely fantastic. She's such a lovely lady, really funny, and I get on ever so well with Karen. We met each other through just really talking on Instagram, and then I met her once at Sobrum, and we've just kind of carried on talking since then, so it's been really lovely. So we have a bit of a fortnightly sewing Zoom chat with each other, and we have a sewing session, cups of tea, we put the worlds to rights, all that kind of thing. And whilst we've been doing that, we kind of came up with the idea that we would start doing some collaborations with each other, and we would sew the same pattern. It came by chance because we both had decided we were going to sew the same pattern at the same time, which was the New Look 6446 pattern, which we both did a collaboration video on just recently, and I'll put a link in here to both mine and Karen's videos so that you can watch that if you haven't seen it before. So it's been a really lovely thing to do, and this time we decided we were going to do the Tilly and the Buttons Marigold Jumpsuit, but it hasn't quite gone as we wanted it to, or according to plan, because we started sewing this probably around about the start of the summer holidays, and we did a couple of Zoom sessions together, and we always sew the same section at the same time so we both sort of know where we are and what we're doing. But then the summer holidays hit and time's just been really hectic and busy for both of us. Me because of work and my children, and Karen because she's got such little children. Of course, she's got them at home and it's really hectic for her. So it's just been really difficult to get our sewing Zooms together. So whilst ordinarily we'd do this together, we've done it a little bit together and sewn it separately as well. So what I'm going to do before I tell you much more about mine is pass you over to Karen and show you her and her version, which is absolutely gorgeous. So here's Karen.
Hi Angela, hi everyone, I hope you're all doing really well. So I firstly just want to say thank you Angela for having me back on your channel today to review my version of the Tilly and the Buttons Marigold Jumpsuit. I have had quite an experience sewing this garment up, as I know you have as well, so I'm really glad that we did this together. It's been quite fun. Unfortunately, myself and Angela didn't have as many sewing Zoom sessions as we did with our previous collaboration, just because it's been such a busy few months with having the children off from school, and it just being summertime, and for one thing or another just got in the way of us being able to sit down on an evening and have our Zoom sewing sessions. So I think we only had 2 sessions together, and then we have sewn up the rest of the garment on our own, but we did come up with the same issues along the way, so that was quite interesting. So for my version, I have used a viscose fabric that I got from Bobbins and Buttons in Leicester, and I have had this fabric for about 2 years, but I did have it lined up for this particular pattern, so I'm pleased that I went ahead and paired them up. It's been quite an experience sewing it because viscose isn't my favourite fabric to use, and I did find it shifted around quite a lot, and during the cutting out process I didn't have a very enjoyable time doing that. It slipped about everywhere. Even though I used my rotary cutter and some pattern weights, I still didn't get the pattern pieces very accurate. So whilst I was sewing it up, I did have to make sure that I sewed it really well so that you wouldn't notice the errors that I'd made in cutting. Mainly for the waistband section, to be honest, it just wasn't very straight at all, but as it's elasticated you can't tell that I've had any issues with it, thank goodness. So it has been an interesting sew from start to finish. I think I was feeling quite negative about the make at the very start. As I first started reading the instructions, I thought, gosh, this is actually quite an involved make, especially as it's a Tilly pattern, and it's one of her earlier patterns as well. So I did borrow Angela's instructions for this pattern because I had the free pattern from the Molly Makes magazine quite a while ago. And the instructions that were provided with that version are very sparse, so I did need the ones that were holding my hand a little bit more. and I have been wanting to sew this pattern for quite a while, so I am glad that we finally got round to it. So my version, as it was viscose, was a little bit more of a difficult sew, and if I was to make it again, I would probably go for a more sturdier fabric, something like a linen viscose where you've got the linen in it to just give it that little bit more stability really. Especially I found the difficulties with the inserting of the zip, inserting the facing around the neckline, and then just the overall sewing of it, just using shifty fabric on my sewing machine and that kind of thing really. But I am really glad that I used this fabric in the end, because it's actually very comfortable to wear, very lightweight, and it feels really nice to wear. So I have actually been pulling it out of my wardrobe a lot more than I thought. There was one point during the sewing process that I started questioning my fabric choice, especially after I had sewn up the trouser section. I just thought, gosh, this looks really busy, and I didn't know whether I looked a little bit like a clown wearing these trousers. But I thought, well, I'll give it a chance, and once I attach the bodice, I might feel differently about it, and I do. It is a very bright fabric, and very vibrant, and very busy, so it is the kind of sort of garment that people are going to look at me on the street, but I don't mind. I do feel quite happy in this make, so I am really pleased with it after all the fun I'd had sewing it up. I did actually finish it whilst I was away on the sewing camp that Crafty Sew and Sew had held recently, and the only thing I had left to do when I got home was to just hem the trouser legs. So I'm really pleased that I took that with me and just got the majority of it finished whilst I had the chance. So I went with the standard neckline, which has got this sweetheart neckline here, and I really do like that. It was just something a little bit different to any other style that I've got, so I thought I'd give it a go. And it's got these lovely wide straps, which cover your bra straps. I did have a few issues with how they were sitting on me, so I did have to change how they were inserted to the facing at the top. So I did have to unpick the front and the back to get them sitting right. They were slightly too long, and the way they were going off in a certain angle wasn't quite right, so I did have to just alter that slightly just so it sits right on me. But I'm really happy with how they are sitting now. It has a side zip just down the side here, which only goes to literally above the waistband where the elastic is inserted. So it's quite a short section that you open to put the garment on, and I am quite hippie, so that area is my largest part. So putting on this jumpsuit, I do have to kind of wiggle that section on. But once it's on, it's very comfortable, and the bodice fits really nicely, so I can wear it without a top on underneath. Now the back is straight across the back there, and I think that sits really nicely as well, and it's nice and roomy in the top area. So I'm just going to pan you down a little bit so you can see the waistband here. So the waistband has a elastic inserted in there, which is about, I'd say, 3/4 of an inch wide, and I bought anti-roll elastic to stop that flipping about, and I'm really glad that I did that because it's nice and stable, and it's just got a nice ruching effect there where the elastic is inserted, so it cinches that in really nicely. I have found that the bodice is quite short on me, so I think that is supposed to be a little bit longer and have a bit more of a blousey effect over the top. So mine is a little bit more streamlined, but I actually prefer that on me because I think that's a much better silhouette to show off my waist area. It's got these lovely deep pockets at the top of the trousers, and they sort of sit diagonal, so they don't add any bulk onto the hip area whatsoever. The legs are tapered, which isn't my favourite sort of shape, being quite hippie, but actually I don't mind how this looks, and I think because the fabric is so busy, it doesn't really accentuate any area of my body that I'm not happy with, and they just sort of come to just past or just above ankle length, and I've just got them on with some sandals. Yeah, and it's a really nice fit actually, really fits nicely around my bum area and my waist. It's a really, really comfortable sew. So I went with a size 4, which is usually my size in Tilly and the Buttons patterns, and I do have to say that this make is quite generous around the hip area and that kind of thing, but I did end up using just 3/8 of an inch down the side seams and the inside legs as well, just to give me that little bit more wiggle room on my hip area, which I'm really pleased that I did do that because it enables me to sit down comfortably, and it's just as very, very comfortable, I have to say. But everything else is using the standard 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and the standard size 4, so that fits perfectly for me. I did have a little bit of an issue putting the facing in around the neckline. I don't know if it was because my cutting skills weren't that accurate with this viscose fabric, but it didn't quite fit right around the side area here, especially where you have this straight area and then the curved section ready for the sweetheart neckline. I did find that that was a little bit tricky around there, and it took me a couple of attempts actually to get the zipping correctly, and I know that Angela came up a bit of a cropper with that as well. So we were sewing at that stage separately, so we both came up with a problem on that, and we both had to send each other video footage and pictures of how we were doing it, just because it just didn't seem to line up very well. So this is quite an involved make for a Tilly pattern, so I don't think it's recommended for beginners at all. You do need to have had some good sewing experience and some garments under your belt to be able to tackle this project. But I would just suggest take it step by step and just take your time with it. So I did do it in small chunks. It just seemed to take forever to sew this up, but I think that is because I did do it in smaller chunks of time than what I would usually do. And because I was having quite difficulty with this fabric, I don't think it was something that I was wanting to pick up. And yeah, I was just questioning my fabric choice along the way. So I am really happy though with the finished result, and I definitely will be wearing it. At one point I did think, would I ever make this pattern again? Maybe not, but I have actually now overcome that, and I would like to make it again, but I would like to try it in a different fabric. So definitely a plain fabric, so I can wear it with a top underneath. I think that would look really nice, and I absolutely love Angela's version that she has made as well. I think the blue is just absolutely gorgeous, and you know, she will be able to wear a top underneath that. She did find that she had a little bit more excess around the front crotch area, which I don't seem to have that problem, but I do think that's perhaps because I'm a little bit more hippie and do have a little bit more of a bum, so I just kind of fill it out a little bit more. I think that's the reason behind it anyway. So I'll just show you there that I don't have as much excess here as Angela does. And I don't have a low crotch area down here as well, because when I was actually looking at the reviews on Instagram, there were a few people that said that the crotch depth was quite long, but I didn't alter that, and I'm really glad that I didn't, because otherwise it would have been too short for me. So it fits me quite perfectly. So yes, if you want to have a check onto my channel for my full review of this jumpsuit, please do so. And thank you again, Angela, for doing this sew with me. I really hope that we end up doing another collaboration in the future, but perhaps select our timing a little bit better so that we're not taking so long with it. So thank you ever so much for seeing my jumpsuit. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
Her version is just absolutely gorgeous, isn't it? I really love it, and I love it with the sweetheart neckline and her gorgeous bright fabric. It just looks so lovely, and it suits her so much. So my version is ever so slightly different. I actually made the same size as Karen. I made the size 4, which was correct for my body measurements. My body measurements is a bust 36, waist 30 and hips 37. I made this version, and every pattern that I've made with Tilly, roughly I'm a size 4. I have gone to a size 3 with a couple of other things when it's been a jersey garment, just because I prefer the fit of that, but this seems to be right for me. And I think that Karen's version and my version look ever so slightly different, because although we have both got similar body measurements in terms of what we would have made for Tilly's patterns, it also looks different because of the different neckline that I've done, and also the type of fabric that Karen and I have both used. So mine's been made in a double gauze fabric. Now I'll come up close and show you. It's a navy blue fabric, and it has these little ink spots or paint spots in a silver. They probably look quite white on the screen, but they are actually a little silver spot. And it just sort of breaks up that totally plain fabric with a little bit of interest, and I quite like that. I also think that I could wear this with other things, and maybe a pattern jacket or something like that. So that's why I chose to go a little bit plainer. I haven't used double gauze a huge amount, and I was a bit nervous about sewing with it and what it would be like. I really like it. It's not a particularly difficult thing to use and sew, and there are a few things that you need to sort of bear in mind with it. First of all, when you wash double gauze, it really shrinks up, and it creates kind of like a really crinkly looking kind of type of fabric. Now, you can wear it like that and it wouldn't look out of place. It wouldn't look like you've just worn a completely unironed garment, because it looks purposeful, the crinkles that are in it, or you can iron it. and have it like I have, where it's just a little bit sort of smoother. There is still a bit of a crinkle and a bit of a texture to it, which might not be coming up on the screen, but I have pressed it sort of fairly lightly just to press out those crinkles a little bit. So what you need to bear in mind when you're using double gauze is that you need to think about whether you want to wear it as a crinkled sort of look or a slightly smoother look. And it really doesn't matter which way that you do it, it's just that however you're going to do it, you need to sew it in that form. So if you're going to go for the really crinkly look, don't press it at all, because if you do press it, then and you make it, when you wash it and it crinkles up, it's going to be too small for you, and it's not going to look right. And likewise, if you sew it up and it's really crinkly, but then you decide to press it, obviously it will then maybe look a little bit too big for you. So you just need to bear that in mind when you're sewing with it. I didn't use a walking foot when I made this, but I think possibly it would have been a good idea for me to do that. I have actually got a walking foot, but I'm a little bit worried about using it. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm worried about using a walking foot, but I do think that it would have helped just to get that fabric to move together a little bit. It's not particularly slippy fabric or anything like that, but it did just make it, I think it would have made it just that little bit easier and a bit smoother. And there were some times when I felt that the fabric was moving different to each other as I was sewing it along. The other thing to note about this fabric, which I bought from Guthrie Ghani, by the way, I'm not sure if I mentioned that, is that these little ink spots or paint spots that are on it, when I went to go and press it for the first time, I realised very quickly that the heat was going to disintegrate those spots. So I had to be really careful about pressing this and make sure I always pressed it on the wrong side of the fabric, or if I didn't do that, I used a pressing cloth of some form. In my case, I just used an old tea towel, just so that I wasn't going over those spots and ruining them, because obviously it would look really strange if I did that, and I think, yeah, it wouldn't look quite so good if I had disintegrated some and not others. So this has been a really challenging sew for me, I have to say. I feel like I've sewn garments which are way more complicated than this, but this did tax my brain a little bit, and I feel like Karen had the same issues as me. So I'm not sure whether or not we were just both having a bit of a moment, or whether or not it was the pattern instructions or what, I'm not quite sure. Tilly's patterns are absolutely fantastic, and they are so fantastically explained. The pictures or illustrations or whichever form are in her patterns are always absolutely fantastic, and I really love how she explains all of the patterns. It's a proper hand-holding experience when you sew a pattern with Tilly. But I just found a couple of things slightly off with this pattern. So first of all, the facing for my pattern piece, or my bodice, was ever so slightly short, and I think Karen found the same thing. And I think another time I would just lengthen it ever so slightly so that I could finish it off in exactly the same way. It just meant that where you normally encase the zip in your lining, it just didn't reach, and you couldn't do that. So either I needed to finish off the facing with my overlock or a zigzag stitch or something like that before stitching it down, but I'd already put it all in place by this stage, and I didn't realise when I actually came to do it that it was going to be a bit too short. I also found that putting in the zip was a really interesting and slightly taxing thing to accomplish. So at the moment, this is where the zip is, and it's just down the side seam on the bodice, and it comes down to the elastic on the waist, and it's coming in nice and smooth there, just like it is on the other side where there is no zip. But when I first put this in, the zip came down here per the instructions, and I had sort of a great big sort of triangular notch kind of cutting out on here, and it just didn't look right at all, and I didn't quite know what to do. I tried to rectify it and I couldn't, and in the end I realised I had enough of this fabric to be able to cut out a second bodice. So I just thought, do you know what, I'm not going to mess around anymore. I'm just going to cut the bodice out again and sew it again and put the zip in as per I would normally, and I did that, and it's gone in absolutely fine. So the top bodice bit, as you can see on Karen's, hers is a sweetheart neckline, and that is how the pattern is intended. But I'd seen on Instagram a few people had straightened out the neckline, and it's a really, really simple thing to do, and it just means that you get two different versions out of this jumpsuit rather than just always having to do the sweetheart neckline. So all you do is you take the front pattern bodice piece, and where that fold line is that you place on the fold of your fabric, you lay a ruler down that fold line, and then where the top of the sweetheart sort of curve is, you lay a ruler across the top of there, so they meet in a 90-degree angle at the top at the front of the bodice, and you just simply draw across and attach that and fill in that bit of space that's between that 90-degree angle, so that that doesn't curve down, it just goes completely straight. And then obviously what you need to make sure you do is mirror that when you do that on your facing as well, so that they are both exactly the same. So it's a really easy thing. You don't even need to draw a new pattern piece. You can simply lay your sweetheart pattern piece on your fabric and just draw a straight line. It's as simple as that. So it's really easy to do, and I'm glad that I did it because I do like the look of this. However, I would like to try again with the sweetheart neckline. So it has really nice big straps that cover your bra, which is really nice, and I did have a bit of problems with my straps and putting them in. They were very slightly off to where I needed them to actually lay, and I don't think I've got them quite right. Karen finished hers off when we went to the Crafty So-and-So camp a little while ago, and I was there and I helped her with sort of getting her straps to be absolutely right and sit really flat. I didn't do mine, either I'd done them just before or I did them when I got home. I'm not quite sure now what I did, and what I needed was a Karen with me to help me fix mine because I think ever so slightly they just don't quite sit properly. But I'm not going to adjust them now because they fit fine for, you know, for this version that I've made, and I'm really happy with how they're looking, so it's fine. So the bodice is not overly fitted, it's just a nice sort of relaxed fit. It has an elasticated waistband here. I use an anti-roll elastic which Karen had suggested I'd use. I never had used it before, but it's really sitting nice and flat, and it certainly doesn't feel like it's going to roll or anything like that. I made sure that I didn't over tighten the elastic, so it's nice and comfortable. It has nice big pockets in it, and I'm really pleased with those pockets. They don't really add bulk to your hips because they are not inseam pockets, they are like these slash pockets down the side like that, so they sit really nicely and really flat. I feel like my crotch line is just ever so slightly too deep, and I could have just done with that coming up around about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. I wouldn't want to shorten it too much because obviously you don't want it to be too tight on your bottom, and you don't want to sit down and be uncomfortable, but I feel like it's just a bit too low. I do think that anybody else looking at me wouldn't particularly think it's low, but I just feel like it is. One of the other things that I felt I had was a bit too much excess fabric around the front area, but to be fair, now that I've put them on and I've worn them and they're all fully made, I don't know that I'm so worried about that now. And I think if I did just purely reduce that crotch line, sort of maybe by like 1 inch like that, that would completely eradicate that sort of excess fabric that's there. So I think that would be a really simple thing to do. The other thing that I have found, and I just cut these out as a complete straight size 4, I didn't adjust any of my seam allowances or anything like that, but I did find that they were just ever so slightly short, so I haven't taken them up by the full seam allowance or the hem allowance that's on this pattern, because if I did they would have been way too short for me. So what I did is I overlocked the bottom edge, and instead of turning them over twice like the pattern would suggest, I just turned them up once, and I only turned them up by about 1 centimetre to make sure that they weren't too short. They're absolutely fine as they are, but if I wanted to hem them properly next time, I would just add maybe 1/2 inch to the bottom of them, or 1 inch, so that I could then turn them up correctly as per the pattern. So would I make this pattern again? I think if you'd asked me when I was making it, I would have said an absolute 100% definite no because I didn't particularly love the process of making these, but I think now that I have made them and I've worn them, I haven't worn them out and about at all yet because I've been waiting to do this video and keep them all nice before I actually shared it with you. But I think now that I've sort of put it on, I can feel what they feel like, and I do think they look quite nice. I was a bit worried they were going to look like pyjamas, but I don't think they do. I think I possibly would give it a go again. I'd really like to give it a go with the Sweetheart neckline like Karen has done, because I think it looks absolutely lovely on her. I'd like to get the fit of the straps right and, you know, adjust all the sort of crotch and everything, but I still think I'll wear these. But in terms of making them again, I probably won't make any this year, but I will have a go at making some next year for next summer, hopefully, if the weather's nice enough. I'd really like to make them in a rayon or a viscose like Karen has. I know she hasn't enjoyed making them in that fabric, but I think it would be really nice to see that, because I think that the drape and the way that the viscose falls is completely different again from how this actually falls and how this works as well with the double gauze. So all in all, I am quite pleased with it. I think I've learned quite a lot. I would say that it's not the most beginner friendly pattern. I think that you need to have sewn quite a little bit before you actually make this, or if not, certainly have somebody close to hand that would be able to give you a hand with it. But I think it is a really great pattern, and yeah, I give it a thumbs up. So if you haven't been over and watched Karen's video yet, please do go over and have a little look. Her jumpsuit is lovely, as you would have seen on my on the little bit that I've put in on this video. I'll leave you with a few more pictures and things of both of our jumpsuits, but other than that, I hope you're all well. You take care, have a good week, bye!